I got a hardcore story for you. Hardcore is, I don't know, thinking about what God wants us to do, but not only what we read in the Bible, but what we're feeling when we get a certain direction. Sometimes it's doing something we have no idea why we're doing it. We're just doing it. So if you're going to do something, do it to the best of your ability. Before I start the story, when I told my friend this story to begin with, and we were talking about how it happened, he told me that he got a phone call from my mom, who had a premonition that if we went out that night, one of us was going to die. That's a horrible premonition. Well, I found that out years and years and years after this happened. So we all went out anyways that night, like young people do, and we were going to go out. We hiked way back into this place called the Res. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. And I remember this story so well because we happened to be talking about God at the time. And I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let me go back to the being hardcore enough to follow through with God's saying. I was a wrestler in high school. I was very, very successful at it, and I ran, and I ran, and I ran. I ran about 6 miles every other day to stay in top shape so nobody could beat me because I ran out of gas. And wrestling season was over, so I kept running. I had no idea why I kept running, but the trail was very interesting. It was through the levee, across a big bridge overlooking the river, and then across the street through a forest area, and one lap around the graveyard, and it was just a hair over 6 miles. I did that for a very long time. I ended up moving away from there, very, very far away, like 1,200 miles away to another state, and I still had the urge to run. Didn't know why. There was no reason. Didn't have to be in shape. There was no wrestling matches coming up or anything, but I still had that burn, so I knew I had to do it. I did move to an area that I knew somebody from when I was younger, like best friends when you're in 4th grade, and now you're practically a young adult, so it's a pretty big gap in time. And I had a job opportunity actually that I took, and I told him, I said, I need a place to run, and it needs to be about 6 miles. So we started cruising around, went up and down some hills, took me around several blocks, and he said, you got to check out this graveyard. And we were done with the graveyard and went back to his house. It was just a little over 6 miles. I thought that was really strange, and I knew right there and then that was like a sign, if you will. So I ran it every other day. No reason. My friends used to say, what are you silly? Why you keep running this? I said, I don't know. I just kept running it. I had so that was a long time. Months and months and months of running. Just had the feeling you had to run, you just did it. Well, a group of us friends, probably 30-some plus, 40-some plus people went out, and it was miles out of town. You had to go through a fence. You went across the barriers that you weren't supposed to cross. We all carried our food and water, and we were going to have a picnic out there, like a bonfire actually. It was at night. But I remember talking to my girlfriend at the time, and I said, wow, look at God's, his designs are so amazing. You can see that shadow over there. And I remember looking back at my friend, my childhood friend I knew for such a long time, and he was with some friends, and they were all laughing. And the way the moon was coming through, there were shadows, and the way the mountains were blocking, so you could see some of the road, and then it would get real dark. I said, it looks like a laser line that God made in between the darkness and the light. It's so insane. And she looked back at it, I looked back at it, and we could kind of hear screaming, and it didn't seem natural. I mean, why would people be screaming all of a sudden for no reason? And it just crashed through the daydream of, wow, this God's interesting stuff. And we looked back, and people were on their knees. And your mind's going like, why are you on your knees, Well, our friend fell over the edge. It was a levee type that had an incline about like that, of big boulders. They were anywhere from bowling ball size to knee size. They interlocked one another, but when it went down, there was a tunnel that went through. So you have some that goes down, a tunnel, and the road that goes over, almost like you're looking through binoculars, and a road would go over the top. Well, he fell down the whole side. Might have hit some rocks, I don't know. You couldn't see him. I remember running back. People were screaming. It was horrible. I was scaling down in there, looking at the rocks, and I was calling his name. I mean, I knew something. I could feel it in my heart. I knew something was wrong. Crawling back in there, and I could kind of see his outline. It was very, very dark. I was feeling it. Felt kind of wet, and I was thinking, the water's not due out for the res for a while. It shouldn't be wet back here. And I was feeling him, no movement. Enough to not move somebody if they've fallen. You don't know how badly they're injured. I remember looking at my hands and getting my hands in the light, and they were just red. Like, oh my God, this can't be. I crawl up on him. He wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing. My hands were wet with blood. I put it underneath his nose. I could barely feel anything. I prayed to God. I was panicking. I was breaking down. I prayed to God and I said, please let him long enough. I remember specifically the prayer. Please allow him to make it to the ER. Please give him a fighting chance at least. And I was praying, trying to get up the incline. It was high enough up there, and I was stretching as far as I could because I knew I had to stretch out for the run. And I was kind of cold. Stretch up to the top. I came up to the top. I was like, keys. It was like an Olympic race. Friends had already been running. We had some people on the football team. We had a ballerina. We had a guy in security. One person was on the police force. I had some in-shape people at the time. And I remember reaching back for the keys. I grabbed the keys and I started running as much as I could. And I ran and I ran, and it was my best run. I know it was. I ran as fast as I possibly could. And when the road winds around, you couldn't quite see where the cars were parked. I could get a little glimmer of the red car. Then when I saw that glimmer, I knew I was getting close, so I poured on more speed. And I was thinking I could pull something, running that hard, but it was worth the risk. And I ran harder and I sprinted. I got around the corner and I could see a better view from the cars, and my heart just stopped. The car was blocked by cars in front of it and back of it. And I remember just like, oh my God, my friend's going to die. I breathing, you can't breathe right. I had the keys, my hands were shaking. I remember opening the door. People were so far back, there was no way I could run to them, find the right keys, and run back. I grabbed some water. I had my pants a ripped shirt. I was bleeding too. It sucked, man. And I remember pretty much crying, breaking down next to the car, and the pain in my side was horrible, and I knew then that was when hardcore had to kick in. That was the prayer. That was the reason I ran. And my mind, at the tiny part of your brain that says, hey, you already blew your stuff running to the car. You have nothing left in the tank. But I did. I had the Lord's grace that time. I started taking the steps, started running, willing myself to run and try to get the rhythm. Stone sloppy, almost falling, had a little bit of water. And running and getting and talking to them. You could hear dogs. There was nothing out there. I'm talking some moonlight, some sticks, rolling hills. It was horrific, not a car in sight. No, it was just bad. And I could hear my feet echoing when I'm running. And I managed to hit my stride, and I talked to God the whole way. He got me to the hospital. And when you came into the emergency room, and that was just knowing in the pit of your stomach that that's what the prayer was for. Do you have faith to follow through in the prayer? And I did. Got to the door. I know I looked terrible. There was a guy, they had this 24-hour door thing, and the ambulances came around. They would see you in, but you couldn't just walk in after, I think it was 10 o'clock or something like that. And I told the guy, I said, couldn't hardly breathe, and I was trying to tell him my friend fell at the res, and he was like, there's a body at the res. Like, there's no body out there. And he was looking at me, and I was trying to communicate to him, and he kept re-saying what I was trying to say. I needed some help. He said, you killed your friend at the res. And like my friend, finally he got up. My friend fell at the res. He was on the microphone, leaning on it. Boom! I could hear our conversation echoing in the hallway. It sounded like a terrible, scary movie. People just came pouring out. It was like I started, you go in a major biblical mode here, but it was like the parting of the Red Sea. Everybody just went whoop around me and left me standing there. Sirens, police went off. I called a sister. I'm guilty of taking a hospital shirt, wiping off, leaving it there, getting some water. She picked me up. I don't remember the next few days. I slept in my house, missed work. It was just recovering. It was just horrible. I couldn't move. I was so stiff, just depleted, but I knew I'd never run that good again. That was it. That was that one time. And the incredible part about it is when he told me the story many years later, he said, you know what? I have my doctor's papers here. And he had them, and I said, D.O.A. He was dead on arrival. I got what I prayed for in every sense of the manner. And they brought him back. God's touched our lives many times since then, but that's a story for another day. I just wanted to tell you about being hardcore. So if you feel the direction, you got to be hardcore enough to answer the prayer. Keep coming to church, you guys. Take care.